Hey, so this is partly film review, but it's also a few thoughts on a wider issue, which is in fact the power of film. I want to talk about this. The Hurricane. It's a 1999 film with Denzel Washington in the lead role. Great actor Denzel Washington. I've been watching a few of his films recently. I was watching Philadelphia the other day. I think he's one of the best actors around. Um, so, The Hurricane is the story of the middleweight boxer Rubin Hurricane Carter, who was involved in a high profile case in which he, along with an accomplice, was charged with a triple homicide in the city of Paterson, New Jersey in 1966. And he spent a very long time incarcerated for that. And the film explores the background of this and a group of Canadian liberals, um, motivated in part by a young kind of adopted black kid that they bring under their watch. Who get involved in this campaign to free Rubin Carter. It's a powerful film. It's a moving film, and it includes the song "Hurricane" by Bob Dylan, written in 1975. Now, that song and this film both played a very big part in the narrative of an innocent black man, victim of a racist system, incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit. The problem is, real life is not as simple as Hollywood. I'm not going to say I believe Rubin Carter was actually guilty. I have no doubt there was significant racism in Patterson in 1966. But the film, even though there's a disclaimer at the start that says some of it's fictionalized, there are some very significant flaws, inaccuracy in the film. So, as an example, Joey Giardello, the Italian American who faced Carter for the World Middleweight Championship, is depicted as having won the fight based on racial prejudice because of racist judges. In reality, most people conceded that Giardello did win the fight, including Carter himself. Now, that might sound like a trivial thing in light of the legal case, but it's just one of the things that builds up the narrative of, oh, this guy's a victim of a terrible racist system. Reuben Carter had served time for violent offences. He was not a peaceful man. By his own admission, he had a life of street thuggery. Um, the film, like I say, very powerful performance by Washington, kind of portrays him as this almost Mandela type figure. Um, and I don't think that's the reality. Um, the power that film has is far, far more powerful than any true life documentary. Bob Dylan's song was a major hit. So you cannot underestimate the influence this has on people's emotions. Um, the fact that he was tried by all white juries is a problem, and that's symbolic of a time in the United States when there was endemic institutional racism. But that doesn't automatically mean that this particular black man was innocent. There are a number of sources online um, that cast doubt on the claims made in the film and the narrative promoted by the film and by Dylan's song. And all I would say is anyone that's interested in this case, by the way, I'm not saying I believe Carter was guilty. He may well have been an innocent man. And for the rest of his life, he passed away in 2014. He worked on something called the Innocence Project based in Toronto. Um, so it's very difficult to know. All I would say is people need to look at it objectively and not through the prism of a Hollywood film and not through the prism of a popular song. That's the problem. It's populism. People get emotionally responsive because of it. This is a 1960s America. The whole narrative in the film of a racist detective determined to put Carter away, that's almost entirely fictionalized. In fact, the man whom that character is supposed to be based on tried suing the film producers because they saw it as defamation. Um, and this is a problem I really have. No director will say that they're a historian or um, a documentary maker. but they have a responsibility. And if they're talking about real people, when you are basically portraying someone as a racist, that can have enormous damage on their reputation. Um, to this day, I should add that that crime has never been solved, and because of all the focus on Carter, people forget there were three innocent victims. Let's not forget them. So it's a powerful film, powerful performances. I believe it won several Golden Globe awards. Well, Denzel Washington actually won the Golden Globe in 2000. The film's directed by Norman Jewison. It's a powerful film, compelling story, but it is not a documentary. And when I see comments on the internet, you know, comparing Rubin Carter to like Nelson Mandela and other civil rights leaders. I mean, Muhammad Ali was involved in the movement to have him released, but Muhammad Ali was hardly a neutral source. Muhammad Ali was not above playing identity politics. In fact, he was famous for it. You know, um, so it's far easier to, making a film about a man wrongly convicted, a victim of racist America. That's a far easier film to make than will actually possibly he was a thug who killed three people in a robbery. The truth is, we'll never know for certain. Tapes that Carter himself recorded apparently have been lost. A BBC documentary earlier this year tried to track them down. I haven't seen that yet, but all I would say is anyone interested in this case, I'm not saying that Carter was guilty or innocent. All I'm saying is don't assume that you know everything because you're emotionally moved by a film or a song. Bob Dylan was a folk singer, is a folk singer. He was talented, the film was powerful, but neither of those things, nor Carter's book, which obviously is going to be biased, he wrote autobiography, The 16th Round, in which the film was based. Um, they don't tell the whole story. And that's not to say that there aren't. I have no doubt there are many, many African American men, particularly in the Jim Crow era, who were absolutely victims of racist injustice. No question about it. But that does not mean that every time a black man was convicted, he must have been innocent. And like any film connected to identity politics, there's bias. So all I will say is anyone interested in this case, look at different sources, okay? Don't just use this film and the Bob Dylan song and emotional responses to determine the truth. Um, the case has never really been fully solved. Two juries convicted Carter, but they were deemed to be racist because they were all white. Well, the principle was flawed. If you have an all white jury, there's more likely to be a racist outcome. But that doesn't mean that every white juror is racist. 24 people, beyond a reasonable doubt, found this man guilty in a court of law. So, do you go with all hardcore racists? I don't know. I don't think it's that simple. So, good movie, it makes for compelling viewing, but it is not a documentary. And people need to stop treating films like this like they're documentaries because they're not. Another example in Titanic, Officer Murdoch was depicted as having committed suicide on deck. Well, his family tried to sue James Cameron over that because he came from a strict Presbyterian Scottish family. Now, witnesses said that an officer killed themselves on deck, but no one clarified that it was Murdoch. So all I'm going to say is do not treat historic films as documentaries. First and foremost, the job of a director is to make an entertaining or inspiring narrative, not to make exact replication of history, of historic fact. So that's just a few things to think about. And the case has never been solved. So let's not forget the three innocent victims. It may well be that Rubin Carter was a fourth victim, an innocent man wrongfully convicted who served hard time in jail. But it may also be true that he was in fact guilty and he managed to dupe a lot of people. I don't know if we'll ever know the truth.